Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another snoCast. It's that time again. We're going to be diving into a new topic. I have a brand new guest. Everybody say hello and welcome to Razbuten.
Hi, Razbuten.
Wow, the audience just, like, voiced up. That's the first time that's happened.
Amazing.
Wow,
So
super cool. I heard that Raz wanted to be Rasputin, but... you know, he wanted to be named after a peasant that was killed, but that was taken, so...
try, like, the counsel to the Russian queen, not a peasant.
Do you like how I, like, looked up Rasputin to make it, like, I had to, like, make sure I knew what that was before?
Well, yeah. Yeah. He's the dude that, like, died, like, 5 times when people tried to kill him.
5 times?
Yeah, you know... I know this is not the topic for the day.
we should do a Rasputin cast.
Yeah, but like he was assassinated and they like stabbed him, but he didn't die. They poisoned him, but he didn't die. They tried to like burn him, but he didn't die. And eventually they drowned him.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that, but it's along those lines.
But instead you're Razbuten.
Yeah, because Razbuten was taken. Shamefully.
He's popular on YouTube.
I guess so.
Even from beyond the grave.
Yeah.
Raz, tell us what you do on YouTube so we can look for you.
Yeah, so I make videos. Recently, it's been a lot more game design-esque videos or kind of speculative videos about what a game could have done. I also have a review series called Shh, I've Never Played, where I talk about games that I've never played before, as the title suggests. Usually they're more popular games. I've done like Castlevania, A Link to the Past. I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun for me to do those because I feel like a lot of reviews on those games are nostalgic-based reviews.
Yeah.
And that's all fine and dandy, but the thing about nostalgia is it does not... like, you can't buy into other people's nostalgia. Like, you kind of have to have that nostalgia.
Yeah.
So whenever I would go back and watch like a video about Castlevania, I didn't care.
Right.
I didn't play Castlevania as a kid. And a lot of times when they're like, oh, I loved this game when I was young, you know, it's like, whatever. So yeah, it kind of gives I don't want to say an objective view because it's still very tainted by how I felt while playing the game.
Well, it's new too, so I mean, it'd be a view from... I've played more modern things than this, too. So, yeah. I mean, there's that view of it. But
yeah, and I'm sure that might annoy people when I try to, like, bring in modern game design stuff to past game design. And they're like, bro, it was 20 years ago. Give them a break. And I understand that. I'm not going to stop. But,
right.
You know, I understand.
I noticed with your series that we actually had a lot of those games in common. Like, I've never played fully Super Metroid. Like, have played it very briefly, but recently, never when it was new.
Yeah.
And all those, I looked at a lot of those games and I was like, oh, me either. I've never played those either. So we have a lot in common, actually, in that area.
Yeah, I think it's mainly because I was just a Nintendo kid. Whatever Super Metroid is, and I guess Castlevania is. So that's a bad example.
Right.
But like, I was a very specific type of Nintendo kid, and by that I mean Mario and Zelda. My SNES library was very limited. Mine was Donkey Kong and Mario pretty much. Yeah.
So
and really I came in during the N64 era. So
yeah.
And that was after like Metroid. I mean, for a while.
If only they made Metroid 64.
if only.
What if they did?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness. Excellent. Well, good. Yeah, Raz makes amazing stuff. I mean, I know he just said that and everything, but I'll put that plug too.
I did not say amazing. I would not call it amazing.
He was bragging on his videos, but let me brag on him too.
I was explaining them.
No, very, very good stuff. Game design, of course, is always something I'm very interested in. He has awesome videos. Check out his mini-maps video. If you've never seen anything, that's a good little gateway to the rest of his stuff. But anyway... yeah, so our topic today is not Rasputin, it's not the channel Razbuten, and it's also not Steve-O Hobo. But our topic today...
the topic is always Steve-O Hobo,
That's true. He'll always come up. Franchise fatigue. Now, this is a very interesting topic. To start off, why don't we kind of define what that means? Maybe we have some viewers that are 8 years old and don't know what the word fatigue means. What do you think, Raz, is franchise fatigue in video games?
So the best way I would describe it is typically what is seen right now is the regular release of a series that kind of starts to get stagnant and tiresome. I mean, that's what fatigue means, being tired.
Right. Yeah.
So the prime example is Call of Duty, how it has a new game every year, and it's constantly coming out. And people get tired of the release. They're like, oh, another Call of Duty or Madden, and
sports games every year.
Yeah. And it's constantly something's coming out and you get tired and you don't want to keep up with that $60 price tag every year because it gets expensive. So it's really just a series that I don't want to say overstays its welcome. But I mean, that's part of it, but it's more of pumps out like it's welcome too quickly.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the fatigue part is when it doesn't keep doing things new or innovating or things, and it's just more the same. Yeah. That's where people get tired of it, and the fatigue is, this is just the same game with a new map or something. I was thinking this earlier, we were mentioning this before, but like we should just get those games that are super guilty out early. Let's just lay them out because it'd be really easy for this cast to just be like, yeah, think of this game. Terrible franchise fatigue. It's awful. But I don't want that to be the whole focus. Let's just lay them out. Those ones, Call of Duty, the first one I think of, absolutely. Yeah. I think Assassin's Creed now is that way. Yep. Sports was a good one I didn't think of. The sports ones every year. Like, I don't understand why they're not just like a roster update. But it's got to be a new game every year.
Well, I mean, it's because they sell. And same with Call of Duty. I looked up, in preparation for snoCast, I looked up some stuff, and one of the things I noticed was, so the first like dip in sales, like unit sales for the Call of Duty series was from Black Ops 2, I think, to Ghosts, whatever the newest one.
Yeah.
It only sold 16 million copies, where the one before it sold 24 million.
Jeez.
And for a while there was a big, rise in sales. And then it dipped down by like 8 million sales, which is significant. I feel like they still made enough money for it to matter.
Seriously, yeah.
But it does show that 8 million people dropped off. Which is probably not great for their business model, and pushing forward a new one.
Yeah, that one still blows my mind because they're still going. Like, it's not like that's one that has fatigued and is no longer around. That's one that's still, and it's unbelievable to me that it's still thriving. Like, that's a major point that I was thinking of is why did they keep going if it's so fatigued? But it's because it sells, and that's what you were saying. Like, it's still a massive seller.
Yeah, I mean, that's what matters at the end of the day. It's not really how good something is. It's how good something sells.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, people still want to buy Madden every year. It's because they do a good job marketing and being like, it's going to be new. You're going to have a new physics engine. And it's like, okay.
Well, that's a good point. They're always at E3, right? Like, there's always some sports section at, any kind of game expo where they're showing off stuff. And it never interests me, but there's clearly a market because they're buying them. So yeah.
I think another one thing that would be interesting to me is if they had a new Madden game like every 4 years.
Yeah.
And then, like as you said, just did roster updates.
Well, because I thought, like, my friend had NBA 2K, whatever it was, and they did that. They updated rosters as players changed teams and stuff. And I was like, so why do they keep making new ones then? If you're gonna have the updated roster on your old game, why? I didn't get it, but
yeah, I mean, I guess what it comes to is updating a roster throughout 1 year is fine.
Yeah.
But once you do it for multiple years, then you're just giving free content, and God forbid doing that, you know?
Yeah, well, right.
Rewarding your gamers, being like the Shovel Knight crew, like Yacht Club.
Exactly, seriously.
Another big series that I'd say is hitting some fatigue is Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah, that is a very new one. That's absolutely.
I mean, it's going to have like 4 games in a
movie, apparently.
In a movie 4 games within like little over a year. I believe the 4th one is coming out a little later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, people who are big fans of the series don't seem like they are fatigued by it. It seems like everyone else is fatigued by it who might not have even played the game.
That's true. The people that are complaining are the ones that haven't really played it, or, you know, at least it seems that way.
And that kind of gets into one of the points I wanted to bring up, which is, so we are in a fairly unique community, being video game content creators. We view a lot of content for that reason. We view it in a certain lens, and we start to see trends in the content that comes out. So I feel like for me, I've been getting a lot of fatigue for games, not even when I've been playing them, but like franchises I just get sick of hearing about in videos. And Five Nights at Freddy's is a perfect example.
That is a perfect example.
Like Let's Plays, you know, like it seems like there's like a new game theory video on Five Nights at Freddy's every other week.
Right.
And like everyone's doing it, and it was fine at first. I wasn't interested in it at first.
Yeah.
But it's still a thing, and that's all right. But, you know, I don't care.
That's a really good point, though. Like, YouTube brings kind of a new thing where you can experience a game without playing it now, you know? You can see what a game has to offer through the lens of someone else playing it. And so, yeah, exactly. You can feel like you know everything you want to know about this game without ever watching it. That's actually how I felt about, this is going to seem like a tangent, but it's for real. Lost, the show Lost. Like, I felt like I knew everything there was to know about Lost, and I had never watched a single episode because everyone talked about it, you know? And so it was kind of that same thing where, like, even never experiencing it myself, I was sick and tired of hearing about it. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like there's fatigue simply from a game coming out too much, and then also from hearing about that franchise too much. Another big example for me is Zelda. I love Zelda. It's one of my favorite series, but I'm not excited for the next Zelda game because I'm tired of hearing about Zelda all the time. But in the YouTube space, kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's right now, it's always popular to talk about Zelda.
That's true. It is always a topic on the table.
It does well.
Yeah.
And there are interesting things in it. And I do still find videos about Zelda interesting. I just, you know, it's hard for me to care as much, and the hype is wearing off.
Well, there always seems to be a new Zelda on the horizon, you know? There's always something in the works, or one that's going to be new and coming out, whether it's like a 3D re-release or, you know, a new one. And so it does seem to just be that it's always on people's radar. Yeah. I'm excited for the new one, but I can definitely see where you're coming from. And Zelda's a weird thing for me because like we were talking earlier, I didn't really play, you know, Link to the Past or anything growing up. Even Ocarina of Time, I never played until like my senior year of high school, really. Played all the way through. So I don't have that like kid in love with Zelda relationship. So I see it for what it is, and it's just, you know, the adventure and all that stuff. But it's funny as you get older and you're like, I don't want to invest all my time in this deep adventure like you do when you're a kid, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like I can just spend hours and hours in this world, where now I'm like, all right, I get it. I just want to, can I just fight a boss? I don't know. But
yeah.
I know that I think both of us have very different views than most people about Zelda then. Because of that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, 5 months ago, I was still pretty hyped on Zelda. But yeah, it's just the more you're around it, the more you kind of start to I mean, either you buy into it and you're like, I love 24/7 Zelda content, and that's fine. That's totally fine.
And yeah, we're really not saying that it's bad by any means. It's more just it's kind of that thing of you hear about it so much. When you mentioned how YouTube and you can be fatigued from stuff just by watching stuff on YouTube, one that I thought of was Sonic Boom. And that's a funny one because I was thinking the Sonic franchise. That one's clearly fatigued. Even though it's not, I don't know if they have releases every year. I don't think they do. But Sonic Boom was one that, man, I was tired of hearing because it was everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because how can a game that's so bad become so popular? But it's like it was popular because it was bad. And everyone was covering that it was so bad. And I haven't looked sales numbers, but I got to imagine that helped it sell some, even though it was all so bad. You know what I mean? Just because it was everywhere. It was so popular.
Well, now we're getting into the YouTube politics space, which we are obviously experts on. But, I mean, that's the thing. It's opportunity. Yeah. And I feel like opportunity kind of will lead to fatigue. And it's like Sonic Boom was coming out, which people were hyped for a little while. And then they're like, okay, yeah, this is not going to be a good game. Like, I've heard that they have rushed it. I heard it was like delayed, but then released. I don't know all the details, but there was a lot of stuff behind it that people knew it would be bad, and they knew there would be glitches. And I don't know if like Sonic 06 was the poster child of how well Sonic videos could do about crappy Sonic games,
right?
But everyone knew that Sonic Boom would be a mess.
Yeah,
and people love to watch messes. Like that is a lot of people's favorite thing to do. So what happens is everyone starts making videos about Sonic Boom, because that like cash cow, it's marketable, it gets views and people want to watch it right away. So everyone's making videos, and then, you watch one video and then you look at your like suggested page and it's just like pages and pages. Yeah.
When you were mentioning Five Nights at Freddy's, that's actually what I was thinking of, is like, I feel bad for like Game Theory or the ones that feel like they have to do a video on it because that's what the people will demand. Like, and it was literally demanded. Like the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 Game Theory was a little late, and people were like, "Oh, where is it? It's not here." And it's like, I feel bad for MatPat because it's like he probably doesn't even wanna. I mean, the game is brand new. Like, he wasn't expecting or anticipating. Like, all right, I got to do another one soon. Like, And so again, I guess that's the YouTube politics side, but
yeah.
But that is true. You got to cover what's popular, and I feel like that's a big YouTube thing, is covering what's popular.
Yeah, and I think it adds to the collective fatigue of a game. Is the more you see it in popular culture, the more you kind of get annoyed with it. And in this day and age where Let's Plays are a huge, huge thing, I feel like people get more exposure to more video games more often. And eventually when you see the same Call of Duty video, just reskinned 100 times, you're going to be like, wow, I'm not interested in this at all anymore.
Yeah, definitely. So I had a question, and this is something I was thinking of. Is franchise fatigue a new thing? Because it definitely seems like it's most common in these modern games that are coming out every year. So Assassin's Creed, even it seems like the Arkham games kind of are going that way.
They're getting there.
Which is sad for me. I haven't played one since Arkham City, but I loved the first two games. They were phenomenal. And then I saw, it's like, oh, they're every year. Man, I hope that it doesn't become that. So it seems like it's this modern movement. Call of Duty, it's like, when I think franchise fatigue, I think these modern AAA games. But is it a new thing, or has that been around, for a while?
So I don't have a ton of familiarity with the series I'm about to bring up. So take it with a grain of salt. But Mega Man,
totally.
Ton of Mega Man games, and I think they just got to the point where they were trying. I don't know all the release schedules for it. But I feel like they got to a point where they're like, okay, we need a new Mega Man game, And from what I hear, X7 is awful. And so that kind of brings me to something I wanted to bring up, which is we have this, especially right now, we have this like weird intersection of people wanting fresh new content. They want something new. They want something that will surprise them. But at the same time, they want something that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
That they know. And if it is an established franchise, they don't really want it to be different. They just say they want it to be different.
Right.
And then once you give Sonic a scarf, everybody loses their heads.
It's so true, though. Yeah.
So I think that's something that may have happened in the Mega Man series, is they were releasing games and people were getting tired of the same Mega Man or Mega Man X kind of reskin. Mm-hmm. While those were all probably fun, people were getting tired and like wanted something new. So they called for something new, and then they got X7.
Right. Well, yeah, they had 6 on the NES all in a row that are very similar. They, there are little tweaks here and there, and then, yeah, they had Mega Man 7 on Super Nintendo, which looked different. He looked more kid friendly and everything, and people are like, "What is this? This isn't my Mega Man."
Yeah, and and they tried something new and it bombed. Mm-hmm. They kind of tried to. Well, I don't know if I'd say bombed, but it just wasn't at the same level as other stuff, and the issue is, when you have an established franchise like Mega Man or the modern examples of Assassin's Creed that works, if you try to stray too far from it, people will be lost and people will be mad that it's not how it used to be. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they're going to be mad that it's the same as it used to be. So it's really a lose-lose situation.
That's another thing that I was thinking is just gamers are so fickle. They say what they want, but that's not what they want. And if it's not exactly how they want it, you're wrong. And, another thing too, because the idea with franchise fatigue is they're coming too close together. They're too fast released, right? Mm-hmm. And so people get mad about that because, it wasn't polished. They didn't spend enough time on it. But if a game takes forever to release, they hate it too.
Well, exactly.
And it's a bad example, but like Duke Nukem Forever, because it was a bad game. But when you wait too long, then people get mad that it took too long. So yeah, you have to find like the in between middle period where it's okay to release a game.
Yeah,
and it's silly. But another one that I thought has been around for a long time. Is like the Mario Party series. Mm-hmm. And especially on N64, how I think there were 4 on the N64 alone. Could be wrong. I believe so. But, it's like that's in short succession. And now they're at 10, and people are like, oh, it's terrible now, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I haven't played it. But that's one that I think of. Also, just like Rareware games in general, if you kind of put Rare just as all their games in one series. I know that's not the case, but yeah. If you think of like the time released for their games in Super Nintendo and 64, they released a ton of games in like 6 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Donkey Kong 1, 2, and 3 were year after year. That was exact year succession. They made so many on the N64, so many games. And yet, what's weird about that is it didn't feel fatigued, though.
Yeah, well, that's obviously a little different because that's a studio that was releasing technically different franchises.
Yeah.
You had, DKC, which was, just a couple years before, like, Banjo-Kazooie, but entirely different than Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
And then, like, Diddy Kong Racing was obviously a racer, so
and like GoldenEye Shooter, they're all different types of games. That's true.
And like Donkey Kong Country, or Donkey Kong 64 is similar, I guess, to Banjo-Kazooie in the 3D platformer sense, but still varied enough. Mm-hmm. And I never played Conquer, but I feel like the humor in it is varied. Mm-hmm. It's different, so it appeals to a different audience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, in that case, like, yeah, that would be like developer fatigue, but they were making such diverse games and no one cared.
I guess I more just bring that up to say, like, I'm impressed because they made so many games in such a short time, and yet they're never viewed as, oh, like another Rareware game. Come on already, you know? Like, even Donkey Kong 1, 2, and 3, that's 3 years all in a row, but each one is so different. Everyone's like, oh, they were not sick and tired of it yet. And maybe because it was only 3, and people like trilogies. I don't know. But that's just as interesting to me, that it's like, that's so many games in such a short time, but everyone is like, yeah, Rareware is one of the best developers of all time. And so I'm just impressed that they were able to do that.
So that brings up something else that I find interesting. I was going to ask you, like, what series have you played the most installments of that you started feeling fatigue? And I guess after the DKC thing, I'm wondering, like, what is the boiling point? At what, like, how many games in a series in a certain amount of years does it take to be like, I'm done? Like, this is awful. Because, like, you're right. Like, that trilogy was all within a few years. But the thing is, each game got better.
Oh yeah, and it is innovative. That's the thing that I think is missing in franchises that get fatigued, is it's not innovative enough. Which again is subjective, and talking about gamers that don't know what they want. You know, I mean,
And when I say each game got better, I guess I mean more of DKC 2 was better than DKC, and DKC 3. You know,
it was different.
It was different.
Yeah,
and it was different enough, I think, to not create that fatigue. But obviously, they did not make another DKC game for a long time.
Gave it a little break. That's true.
Yeah.
I can think of a good franchise that I spent too much time with and got sick of, and this was one that I thought of earlier, Guitar Hero. And I was not a Rock Band person. I was a Guitar Hero person through and through. I got in at the first game. Guitar Hero 2 was my favorite. It was phenomenal. And then I really like Guitar Hero 3. They still kind of expanded a little bit. They did like boss battles and things like that. And I was like, this is cool. And then it got really, really popular with 3. And so then they made 4, which was the full band. And then there was Rock Band. And so then there was like all these other... There was way too many. I mean, just the fact that Rock Band and Guitar Hero were coming out together, that's already 2 in a year. But then it was every single year. And then there were spin-off games. And there was Metallica Guitar Hero. And there was Van Halen Guitar Hero. And so, like, I got way sick of it.
Yeah.
And clearly everyone else did, because then they dropped off the face of the earth. No one saw them for, 10 years, and now they're making a new one.
And everybody's guitars started collecting dust.
It's funny, because every time I go home to my parents' house, I see them in the corner gathering dust. I laugh because I still have some games at home, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could take some with me, but the ones I left at home are Guitar Hero games.
Yeah.
Everyone does. They still have their plastic instruments somewhere in storage. And they're just gathering dust.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the series, and we talked about it a bit, is Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
I jumped in on Assassin's Creed 2, and I love that game. I think it's really great. And for the time of kind of open world sneakers, it was fantastic. It did everything it needed to do. And I played Brotherhood. I might have skipped Revelations, and I played Assassin's Creed 3. And I also platinumed them. I did all the trophies. Yeah. So that probably also added to the fatigue. And then I got into Assassin's Creed 4 and just couldn't. And the bummer is they actually do change up the game a lot with the boat mechanic. Yeah. And having that be a bigger thing. But I just, the boat stuff I had fun doing for the most part. It's when I had to do everything else that Assassin's Creed is about. I was like, yeah, I'm tired. I can't be bothered with this.
It's really interesting. That's a really interesting one, because I personally have not played. I've only played the first one, which everyone tells me that was your mistake. You need to play 2. 2's the best. That's all I've heard. But yeah, I see it though through other people, and it's that where it's every year, and I think it's been every year, right? Like ever since.
Yeah.
Start? Like, it's always
Now-
been every year? Maybe.
Now they're pushing out 2 a year.
Which is obnoxious. But, like,
Yeah.
I saw people get so mad at Unity, and I just thought, like, what did you expect? I don't know what...
Yeah.
What, like, it's that cycle, and you see, like, I've seen on the internet the, like, Sonic cycle where a game gets released, you hate it with all your guts, and then they announce a new one and you get hyped for it again, and then it's a cycle. And it's the same thing with Assassin's Creed, where people get hyped for it even though they just got a new game that they hated. And I don't understand that.
Yeah. That's yeah. I think it's because some of these series have fantastic games in them. And I have actually like not played very many Sonic games. I played Sonic Adventure 2, which is very contested to whether it's good or not.
That is true.
I do like, I don't know if you saw Pro Jared's video about Sonic 2.
I did, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but he mentioned a good point of like, oh, this game is really bad, except there are a few like good Sonic levels and a few good Shadow levels, and like the Chow Garden is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And most people probably just grinded those Sonic and Shadow levels. And so that's why they remember the game being good, is because they played the 2 good levels like over and over. I like that explanation. But anyway, off topic. So I don't have a ton of experience with Sonic, and I didn't love that game enough to be like, I want another one. But there are a lot of people that do, that want, you know, probably like a 2D Sonic again.
Yeah.
And those like glory days, they want those back. They want to have a new experience that hits kind of like that nostalgia
Yeah.
that they have and hits those hopes.
Which is weird because they made Sonic 4, right? And that was a 2D Sonic one, but I didn't think it was super well received. I mean, I know it was episodic, so that was kind of weird.
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. That was a little while ago now. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago. But it was like it was a 2D Sonic revival, but I don't think people liked it very much. I don't know.
I wonder if it's because it is episodic.
I think that was a big part of it. Is they were like, it wasn't a full game. But yeah, it
So getting into episodic too, which I feel like fits in with franchise fatigue. Have you played many of the Telltale games?
Yeah, I played The Walking Dead.
Okay.
Just not all of it. The first one, like the first 2 or 3 episodes. So not a lot, but enough to have an experience.
Okay. So like Telltale, that's studio, and kind of getting back, I guess, to the more studio fatigue, because the like real series.
That's a big one, yeah.
The Walking Dead. I mean, so within like the last probably 3 years, they have released season 1 of The Walking Dead, season 2 of The Walking Dead, A Wolf Among Us.
There's so many. Game of Thrones.
The Game of Thrones one, and Borderlands, Tales from the Borderlands. So they have 5 series.
If not more. I feel like there's more, but I just can't think of them. It seems like there's always another one.
Yeah.
Or they're making ones too now that are just on their way.
And of those 5, which I believe are the most recent ones, and yeah, I know they have more. I know they're doing like a couple comic ones, more comic ones. I have played every single chapter of every single game that's been released.
Yeah.
And it's weird, like that sort of episodic content doesn't bother me if it's good. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Arguably, a lot of people don't think those games are good because they're not necessarily games.
Oh right, yeah. People have a big gripe with that, I've noticed. It's so bizarre. Like, I did my video on Gone Home. Yeah. And most people are like, this is not a game. It's stupid. It's just a interactive story. And I'm like, what do you think a game is? And so
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing with Gone Home is it got a lot of praise and was on a bunch of like Game of the Year lists.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the other games that came out. I think like Far Cry 3 was that year. So there were a fair amount of games that had come out that year that were more gamey and, in my opinion, more fun and better games.
Well, yeah, it was funny because if I had done my research, I would have seen all the negative press around it. I didn't realize that there really was. There's a lot of negative tension with that game.
What's interesting is it's not even people's complaints about the game. Sometimes it's usually like
the hype.
The game is okay, but you're saying it's the best game of the year.
Yeah.
So people were getting mad that it's overrated.
Yeah.
And instead of getting mad at the people that were overrating it, they got mad at the game.
Yeah,
which
that's true.
Makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm. Back to gamers. We should do a cast on that gamers are dumb and
and game reviewers are dumb too. Don't worry.
that is true. Yeah,
we're all dumb too.
Sorry, but that was a digress. You're talking about Telltale games.
Oh yeah, they're at this point where anything they release, I'm down for, but they're gonna hit critical mass eventually.
Yeah.
They're having more and more series, and I don't know for them if it's just like, okay, we don't need people to be Telltale fans. We need people to be individual series fans. So like, you know, it's like, we don't expect you to play The Walking Dead, just play Game of Thrones or
well, and
whatever.
And that's what's really smart from them is like TV fans getting into the games of it, because that's a big audience.
Yeah. But I feel like the reason that they have so many like diverse series is the opposite of what I just said, to like bring people into the Telltale family. So it's hard to say because the people that are fans of Borderlands are not the same people that are probably fans of like the Fable series for The Wolf Among Us.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bringing that gamer audience that likes that type of humor and storytelling into the Telltale world and being like, hey, we also have this like more serious story in the same style. Why don't you check that out? So it's like, which way is it? Which way will bring people fatigue quicker? Because
right.
Because if you have 2 games a year, that I don't know, I love it right now. Yeah. I'm in that zone where I'm like, I enjoy these story-based games, or sometimes I enjoy complaining about them and how everybody's dying. But yeah, I wonder at what point they hit critical mass with episodic content like that. And I'm sure some would argue that they have. Yeah.
It depends on so many factors. I like what you said though about just the fact that like it's good though, and that's what brings them in the first place. Because I think that's a really good point to make, is that franchise fatigue doesn't necessarily come to bad games.
Yeah,
it comes to the good games that are highly praised, right? So you kind of have to have a good starting game or couple games that really draw people in, and then they have these expectations, and then the more and more that come out, that's when people fall away. So I feel like you have to have a good starting point to have franchise fatigue, right? Because I'll be the first to admit, Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare,
it's a fantastic game.
Loved that game. Yeah. I was like, this is incredible. You know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. Like, when they announced Modern Warfare 2, and I was like, oh, yes, I will buy that. But then they made Modern Warfare 3, and so on and so forth, and I was like, oh, okay, all right.
And the games in between.
Exactly.
Like World at War.
Yep.
So one of the things with, like, Modern Warfare, or Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like the first one, it just did so many things different with, like, multiplayer. I feel like it was one of the first really big, successful, like the last generation multiplayer games for console.
Yeah.
For a shooter. Not to say that there weren't ones before it that did all right, but it was the first one to really, really hit mainstream aside from Halo.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
Like Halo was obviously the big one since Xbox, because Halo 2 had such a great online presence, but it at least in my database, which is limited for shooters, it was like Halo, and on the other consoles, nothing for a while. Or nothing of that sort of popularity.
Like when PS3 came out, it was trashed so much for having nothing for it. You know, there was no reason to have a PS3.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So another series that I feel like has games come out just about every year, whether it's a reskin or something, is Mario.
Yes, and I was going to bring up Mario as well.
Okay.
Right. What were you going to say? Sorry.
I am not fatigued by Mario, and granted I have not played every iteration of things. Like I haven't played whatever the 2D Wii U Mario was, the new Super Mario Bros. Wii U.
Right.
I didn't play like 3D Land for the 3DS.
Right.
So maybe it's part of that I have just skipped out on certain iterations, which might be a great way to combat fatigue is, hey, don't buy Assassin's Creed 5. Wait till Assassin's Creed 7 comes out and you might be ready for that game.
That is very true, though, yeah.
But I think Mario does a really good job of combating fatigue because they hit like that crazy intersection that is really hard to hit of it being a Mario game. It always feels like a Mario game, but they add new things in to make it feel fresh.
To their credit, seriously, everyone has something new. And it really does. Like, you can say every day that it's the same, you know, blah, blah, blah. I remember Game Grumps really trashing Mario U because, like, oh, more of this. But, like, they add new stuff. It's more about your attitude of how you view it.
Yeah, and like 3D World,
I loved 3D World.
Yeah, I thought it was so good. I thought the multiplayer like didn't always work as well as I could have. It sometimes got frustrating when you wanted to do a level and you're playing with your dumb friends who are so trash.
Well, it had the same thing that the new Super Mario Bros. Had, where you get in each other's way and accidentally throw them off, or on purpose throw them off. And
like, I think that was really fun with the first like co-op Super Mario's Bro, the one for Wii. That was like really fun because you had never really had that in a main Mario game before. That one was one that I played all the way through, loved it, playing with friends. And they kind of have that in 3D World, but for me, I was over that because I'm like, I've done that.
Yeah.
And having my friends just ruin my day.
I'm pretty sure I played 3D World by myself because I have no friends. But
yeah, I played it once with friends, and I was like, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
And then I played it by myself, and I really appreciate the level design because
seriously,
with that game, it's not just that the game does new things, but just about every level throws a new game design element at you.
It's insane. It really is.
It's constantly changing. It's constantly introducing new things and like building off of itself. Like there is a lot of love in that game.
It's
from the design team.
I mean, it might sound like we're overselling that, but if you haven't played it, like, it's unreal. Every level has something new. Yeah,
like and especially like later in the game, it just gets nuts.
And it's the never-ending game. That game goes forever.
Oh yeah, yeah. Gosh. But yeah, so I kind of brought it up, but I'll get into it again. Like with series and game fatigue, for me, a big thing is whenever I try to complete a series and get all the trophies, and that's something that I was trying to do in 3D World, which is why I bring it up.
Yeah.
Which that game, to do everything, you need to beat all the levels, with all the characters, and get to the top of the flagpole with all the characters. Which, come on, like
I did not, and it's funny because I know exactly what you're talking about. Luckily, a friend told me before I played it that you need to do the flagpole and get all the stars, and so I did the flagpoles like as I was going. I didn't have to go back and replay them all. But when I found you have to do it with all the characters, I was like, no, I didn't want to play it again with all 5 characters, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably a good thing that you didn't want to, because if you did, by the end of it, I mean, granted, I guess if you do it over like a 2-year span and like every week you just play like 3 levels, then sure, that's going to be fine. But no one does that. When you're trying to get an achievement, you do it as quick as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Because you need to do it. And then you hate the game and are worn out by it. That's something that happened to me with The Last of Us. The first time I played through it, I loved it. Mainly the story was what pushed me through. I found it very entertaining. And then the more I played it, the more I was like, oh, these gameplay mechanics, there's something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and just having to play it on the super difficult mode, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is infuriating. So now, like, I have no excitement for the next Last of Us game if they do one, just because I'm so tired of the last one. And not to say I think it's bad now. I just can't be bothered. Like,
Yeah, well, and you make a good point that you can be fatigued of a single game just by playing it too much. Like, that it's really easy to fatigue yourself, whether the game is or franchise is fatigued or not.
yeah,
So, and that's kind of a question that I thought of is why we've kind of talked about why do franchises get fatigued, but I guess to rephrase it, like, is it the developer's fault for releasing it too often, or is it the gamer's fault for buying it, demanding it, playing it too much, etc.? You know? And it's kind of a chicken egg situation because I think developers see that they buy it, so they're going to make another one. You know, they want to make money.
sure,
But then it's both sides. I think it's definitely both sides. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, so here's the thing: like, there's obviously a huge call for that sort of game, and we can talk about how like much people want another 3D platformer, like Ukulele's Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But people like they don't they there's that like community that does, but the overall group of people doesn't really want that, and that doesn't mean it can't sell well. Small studios can definitely make good stuff that sells well. I know like Dark Souls, the first Dark Souls at least, was a good example of that with a smaller studio that had like this audience that bought it, you know?
Yeah, it kind of became like a cult classic thing that that grew into a bigger franchise.
Yeah. And losing my train of thought. But it's so like Ukulele like got a lot of money on Kickstarter. I don't know what it's at right now. Let's just say
a lot.
it's like 2 million.
Yeah, it's over that.
Like, that's a lot of money. But it's not going to break $100 million.
Right. Yeah, it's not the gamers at mass,
Yeah.
the biggest group.
So, like, people are still calling for Madden. You know, people want football simulators. People want first-person shooters. There's a want for that. So, from a developer's standpoint, no. Like, I don't think they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Sure, I wish that, like, they had more artistic integrity and wanted to release like their best product of something that they actually are proud of, other than it is something that makes a lot of money, opposed to something that makes a lot of money. But also, I'm not in the situation where I am releasing a big game. You know,
Yeah.
If you put a bunch of money in front of me, like, I'd like to say my integrity isn't viable, but it's really easy for me to throw stones and like, hey, game developers, why aren't you making better games?
Yeah.
You know, and that's probably not fair because I'm not in their shoes. So I mean, I'd say part of it is yes, they could be better about making things that are good.
Yeah.
And that's subjective, but still, they know what they're doing. Another thing is, I don't know if the mass audience really feels franchise fatigue or cares about franchise fatigue. I think you hear about it a lot in this community of people that are thinking about games every single day because we're making stuff about games.
Yeah, that's true.
We're working on stuff and watching content about games. So we think about it in a different way. We don't think about it of, this is what I'm going to do to shut my brain off after work for an hour.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like most of the time, not all the time, because sometimes I play a game to just shut down because I'm tired. But most of the time when I play a game, especially when it's for a video, I'm constantly thinking about stuff and thinking about the design of a level. I'm thinking about the story elements in a level.
It's weird how YouTube has changed how I play games. It really
100%. is. So I wonder if it's not even that most people feel fatigue, but if it's just this like vocal minority that I think is right.
Well, and
I think
we said it ourselves. Like most of us aren't even the ones playing the games, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Like
I don't play Assassin's
I'm
Creed
not
or
buying all the Call of Duties. I'm complaining that they're making them all, but I'm not playing them. So it's a really good point, because I'll go to friends' houses where they're all playing the newest Call of Duty and they're loving it, and you know, they enjoy playing with their friends, or they're playing online, and they're all about, I got to buy the newest one because that's what everyone else will be playing, and I can't play the old one, which I think is like, oh, that's so dumb. Why are you? It's like the angsty teenager in me that's like, fight the system, man. Don't you know, give in and give the developers your money. But like, I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. That might be more us than the masses.
Yeah, and it's like, what makes a good game? You know, I feel like I know. I feel like a lot of people in the community know, like, you know, all the different things that kind of go into different genres. Or at least we all have our strong opinions. But for a lot of people, like, it might just be something that they can, like, shut down to, you know, and just play with their friends. And whether or not like certain design features or character models look good, they don't care. It's just that they are playing a game for an hour, and that's it. That's all they're doing.
Yeah, they don't want to think hard about it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just entirely different from my life as a video game player.
Yeah, yep. I realized how much I was way more into games than most of my friends when I mentioned something about DLC, and they didn't know what DLC was. They were like, what DLC? And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like just people that play games casually are not nearly into it to the point that we are. And so that plays a role in it too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really do believe in franchise fatigue, but the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, is it just us? Like,
did we just have like a self-realization? Like, we hit the epiphany. It's us. It's not the franchises.
Well, yeah, it's just, so a bunch of my friends, like I played video games with my friends all the time in high school. And, you know, since we have moved forward, and my friends, a lot of them still play games, but it's usually Dota, because Dota's free.
Yeah.
And it's usually like a contained 45-minute experience. I've never really played, but it's a contained like hour max experience.
Right.
Which is good for a lot of people because you don't, like, you know, you don't feel tied in. Like I can't go play like Skyrim for an hour, you know, that's really hard. Yeah. It's like, I need to sit down. I need to prep for like 3 hours.
Skyrim is so crazy. Like I literally played it 100 hours nonstop, you know, just like it was always what my free time was doing, and then I just haven't touched it since.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like that's a game that draws you in.
But yeah, so like my friends that play Dota don't watch YouTube videos. They aren't necessarily part of like the mainstream gaming culture, or what I consider the mainstream gaming culture. Maybe it's not mainstream. Maybe it's just this niche community. But like I brought up Shovel Knight, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "You don't know Shovel Knight?" Like,
yeah.
Everybody knows Shovel Knight. Who doesn't know Shovel Knight? I was like, "Yeah, I've been speedrunning it," and they're like, "What's like speedrunning a big thing?" I'm like, "What?" Like,
that's it. It's so true. I know exactly what you mean.
So it's just, you know, I wonder if it's just the circles that you're in, and because we are in this circle of people that play video games for a very specific purpose, and really want to see growth between games. If when we don't see enough growth, that is what bothers us. And maybe like that intersection that I was talking about between wanting new things and wanting to feel comfortable, maybe that's just not like people mental. I do think that exists in people, to a degree, but maybe it's more of just the different communities of voices that sounds like the same gaming community voice of, you know, people complaining about both. But maybe it's like our group is like, let's get new ideas because this is really stale. And then the other group being like, nah, I just want slightly better graphics and maybe a new grenade launcher, you know.
And they're the ones buying them. And that's the thing is we can say, hey, if you want to see an end to franchise fatigue, then don't support it. Don't buy the games. But right, what's our audience? You know, it's going to be less than 1%, it feels like. I don't know.
So
that's a really good point. I didn't really think of it that way.
It's just different voices, Well, we're the lowly the lowly plebs. How can, for our dear viewers, how can you avoid franchise fatigue? We kind of got into it a bit, and not just from a player perspective, because the player perspective is probably just don't play an iteration of a game.
Yeah.
And that's how you avoid it. But from developers that might not be as popular as Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed, you know, that are still trying to release a lot of games. How would you say they could avoid it?
You know, because the easy answer is the things we talked about. Like, well, you just got to innovate. You just got to add new and more stuff. But, like, that is, I feel like, a cop-out answer and a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
Like, when we were talking about 3D World and how every level is innovative and different, I feel like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze was the same way. Those are massive exceptions, you know?
Yeah.
Most games don't have that level of detail when it comes to each level having a unique, different experience. And so that's not like something that everyone can do.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, to say like, well, you just got to innovate. You just got to branch off. I have said in the past, in like past videos, that like a good sequel takes what we loved about the original and just expands it. And in theory, that sounds perfect because you look at some of your favorite sequels and they did just that, right? Like Donkey Kong Country 2 or Banjo-Tooie or, you know, etc. For me anyway. And I look at those...
Ops 2.
Yes, that one specifically. Black Ops 2 was the pinnacle of that sequel. Or like, you know, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Like any of those ones that like, it still felt the same, but they expanded it, added new stuff. I think they get it just right, where it's you still feel the feel, for lack of a better word, of the original game, but you're like, oh, there's this new stuff, and the new stuff is good and not a nuisance, because that's what I think a lot of ones do, is they add this new unnecessary stuff, but it's not fun. And ultimately, that's what's going to be, is it still is fun, which is also just like a, you know, filler word that what is fun, you know. So
well, I'm kind of noticing this trend as you're talking. Like, there are a lot of great sequels. I mean, the ones you mentioned, like Banjo-Tooie is kind of long.
Yeah.
Like, some of those levels are really long, but
they're big, a lot bigger, yeah.
But a lot of those design elements are in my opinion, just better.
Yeah.
And like, Thousand Year Door, such a good game. And Paper Mario for the N64 is good also, but I don't know, Thousand Year Door was just so much fun.
I didn't play it until a long time after its release, and I was like, how did I miss this? It's so good.
Yeah, I haven't played it for a while. I imagine it still holds up pretty well. But it's like sequels, if done right, there can obviously be bad sequels. There are plenty of bad sequels. BioShock 2. And I don't want to say that's a bad game, but it is not as good as BioShock.
Well, there's lots of good, lots of bad. And it's not just Nintendo ones. Uncharted 2, I feel like, was phenomenally better than Uncharted 1.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's not just Nintendo's the only ones that make good sequels.
Yeah. But I'm kind of noticing a trend where it's like the first game is trying to find its feet to varied success. The second game is really good. And the third game is trying to be too much like the second game, but not being better necessarily. You know, so like yeah,
you see a big deviance for sure. Like once you get to a third game, there's very little connected to the first game. It feels like, in a lot of cases.
I feel like Donkey Kong Country is a good example.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking.
Uncharted also. Like I think Uncharted 3 is way better than Uncharted 1, just because just their advances in the technology on the PS3 over those couple of years is incredible. But yeah, Uncharted 2 is, in my opinion, just way more solid. And you have a lot of these series where the second game is good, like Mass Effect. Granted, I think that people hated Mass Effect 3. Well, the thing about Mass Effect 3, they hated it for the ending.
Yeah, it's for not for reasons that necessarily make it a bad game.
For me, so Mass Effect 2 is my favorite just because of how it was designed, like that you were doing all of these missions to like get party members and to get them to like you, which is very different than the progression of like the other Mass Effect game. Well, Mass Effect 3 is still kind of like that to a degree, but the other ones are more like we're progressing to save the universe, and this is like, let's just get a ragtag bunch of people. It was, and that was cool to me. And I thought that the gameplay was better than the other ones. Mass Effect 3 simplifies like everything. I feel like you have less dialogue choices, like decisions in general, not just for the ending, but decisions in general seem to matter less in a lot of ways. And that might be wrong. That might just have been how my playthrough went.
Right.
But that's the impression I got. Where like Mass Effect 1 was such a dialogue heavy game. So a lot of people loved the role-playing element from Mass Effect 1 that did not really exist by Mass Effect 3. And Mass Effect 2 hit that intersection where the gameplay was good because the gameplay in Mass Effect 2 and 3 were more similar, where the shooting, I mean, it is like a third-person shooter, which some people will find boring, and that's fine. But it was smooth. It felt good. It wasn't like unfair. Like I felt like Mass Effect 1 was unfair sometimes. So it hit that intersection between 2 and 3 of having fun, solid gameplay like for the masses. And then it hit the intersection between 1 and 2 of having like good or decent role playing. So 2 had good gameplay and good role playing in comparatively for the series. Where like 3 did not have like much of a like just dialogue options, and like it obviously had them, but it was much more simplified. And Mass Effect 1, in my opinion, was like a mess for combat. So it's like that second iteration a lot of the times can develop things that can obviously be improved upon, but it can build off of what the first one did.
I think you can solidify a lot of things in a sequel. You know, perfect a thing. Like, I'm not a game developer, but like maybe something didn't work out quite right. Not yet. Maybe something didn't work out quite right in the first game. You couldn't get it perfectly solid, but then with more fine tuning, by the time you make a sequel, you've made it more solid. And maybe that's just like stupid to say to a game developer, but it feels that way in a lot of games, right? Where once you hit a sequel, it's like, oh, this one feels better. In fact, I heard that about Assassin's Creed 2, that the first one, just it felt like it was just fetch missions or whatever, and you're just going this and you're going there. But the second one, it felt expanded. The game feel was different. Like the parkour itself was better. Like it just controlled better. Yeah. So I think you can fine tune a lot with a sequel. Yeah.
And then it's like the problem then becomes the third one. Like what do you do with the third one?
And that's with movies too, right? I feel like movies run into that as well.
I think movies are the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think the first one is usually the cult classic. The second one is like, what is happening? And the third one is then pretty good. My examples are Indiana Jones, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, fantastic. Temple of Doom.
Yeah, that's true.
A hot mess. And then I loved The Last Crusade.
Toy Story.
Toy Story 2 is still good though. People like 2 a lot.
I only saw it like once. I don't remember anything about 2.
But I agree. Like 1 and 3, I had more of a connection to.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And Back to the Future, the first Back to the Future, great. The second one, not good. And the third one's, I mean, really not all that great either. But
I like the second Back to the Future.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
The third one is a Western, though.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
It gets to my heart.
Mm-hmm. It's so different. The third one being a Western.
See, with movies, I've noticed it. I don't know, because with movies, they either try to like divert enough that it's not exactly the same. For the second one, that you're like, oh, this is not what I want.
I agree. There are more second movies that are bad than second games that are, and that might not be true. But with what we just talked about, it feels
in the few examples that we have given,
right,
that might be skewed based off personal bias. But isn't that the point of a podcast? Is to show our personal bias.
It's a persuasive essay, basically.
Yeah. So I also haven't seen all the Hangover movies. I did not see the third one, so I cannot say that one brings it back. Mm-hmm. But like the second one was like, oh, this is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think I didn't even see second or third.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
From my understanding, they are the exact same as the first.
Right.
So if you've seen the first, you've seen the other two.
Perfect.
Which, hey, good for you. Good
Save
job.
me some time.
You've seen the series.
Yeah. Well, good. Any other last things to add about franchise fatigue before we wrap up?
So the only point that I didn't get to on my list is the idea that, and I guess we did kind of talk about it, how we are probably not the market for these series that have big franchise fatigue.
That really was a big revelation for me, like, as we were talking about it. It really was. I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Because the big thing is, with those games, it kind of turns into, like, lowest common denominator content. Like, how can we make this game appeal to the most people?
Yeah.
You know, add a mini map. You don't want people exploring. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
But like, that's the thing, is adding design elements and different things and story elements that appeal to the most people possible.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you're gonna what's a good example? Like, I mean, Mass Effect is a good example. Mass Effect 1 has so many RPG elements that do not appeal to the masses, you know? Mm-hmm. But Mass Effect 2 streamlines it a fair amount.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like Gears of War to a degree, like how you fight, the combat. It takes out a lot of the complicated RPG, like your stat trees.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 1, there are somewhat, not extremely complicated ones, but more complicated than 2, which is just like, this is cool, put it in this, whatever. Now have a freezing shot. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of trying to appeal to the masses, which isn't a bad thing. It kind of is. I don't know. It really depends who you are.
But I do think the ones that get fatigued are the ones that do that, right? Or at least and continue to do it and say, hey, if it's not broke, then don't fix it. It'll sell more, and so they do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then they make more money than I can.
and that's the thing. I mean, I think it is that perpetual problem because it is what sells, and then it continues to sell. So
yeah.
Man.
Yeah, but I think that is all I have.
Okay.
I mean, I could probably talk about it, but
I think so as well. But for the purposes of the ones that have fallen asleep by now, no.
Oh goodness, it is interesting. I do listen to podcasts a lot of the time to like fall asleep.
Oh yeah, I know people do. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day because I was like, I know I do video on my snoCast, and obviously in this case we don't have video of Raz, but I know that they're not going to watch it to look at my face, you know.
Sure.
Like, so there's a point where I don't even need the video, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, whatever. It's part of your production.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Raz, for being on snoCast.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. I've wanted to do it since I saw Steve on the first snoCast.
Yeah.
I'm like, that'll be me one day.
And here it is. Yeah. Dreams coming true. This is why I do it. I'm like the Make-A-Wish Foundation for being on podcasts. Was that like really offensive? Okay, so anyway, I appreciate you a lot. This was a good discussion. I thought it went really well. Thank you for listening and just being an awesome listener. That was going well, this outro. Check out Raz's videos. I'll put him in an end slate. He makes really awesome content. I know we said that at the beginning, but if you missed the last snoCast...
I did not say I make awesome content.
Raz said himself.
I make content.
That he makes awesome content. So
I make content that I want to watch. So...
Hey, you know what? That's a good way to put it. I do too.
Yeah.
In fact, I do watch my content over and over again.
While editing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen each of my videos. So many times. Yeah. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the next snoCast. Again, I'll plug this again. There is a Snowman Gaming subreddit on reddit.com. You can go to reddit.com, r Snowman Gaming. And there is a thread for snoCast ideas. So if you ever have future ideas that you'd like to see us talk about on the snoCast, you can put them there. And until then, I guess we'll just see you guys next time. Go play a game, but take a break so you don't get fatigued.
Yeah, and like if you're starting a new series like Final Fantasy or something, go like 1, 5, 10.
Yeah.
Well, 9. You gotta play 9 because 9's amazing.
And 7 and 8 and
okay, never mind. Don't skip any Final Fantasy games. Play them all.
Or just don't play any. Or
just don't play any of them. Yeah, that's probably. We'll play 9.
You know, we didn't talk about Final Fantasy, but that would have been a good one to talk about.
Yeah.
Too late now. Whatever.
Part 2. Coming out next year.
Anyway, thanks for being on, Raz.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
snoCast!